I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited for InventoryLab's 10th birthday. That is such a milestone that many businesses just don't make it to. So congratulations, first of all, to InventoryLab for hitting that huge milestone in business. I'm Cyndi Thomason. I am the founder of Bookskeep. And we are an e-commerce accounting firm that specializes in helping you grow profits with our advisory services, with our bookkeeping, and our Profit First consulting. And what I want to talk with you about today are some of the challenges that we're all facing in the economy in general, but especially in the e-commerce world. So we'll dive into our presentation now and talk about some of those challenges and some of the solutions that you can put in place so that you can weather those storms that seems to be always out there. Okay, so let's see, we need to go one more. Here we go. So these are some of the challenges that I've been hearing about now for a couple, 3 years. Everyone is dealing with increased cost, increased shipping cost, increased advertising cost, operating expenses increasing, finding good employees, payroll cost increasing, interest rates increasing. It seems like everything is going up except our profit, right? Well, I want to tell you that there are some things you can do now to begin to put yourself in a better position. If you can remember back in 2020, when we all first heard that COVID was happening and that things were shutting down locally, our businesses were having to close their doors, and Amazon was saying, we're not going to accept every product anymore, only essential products. It was a really uncertain time. And I think we all thought that at some point we would get this figured out and things would go back to normal. But instead, we're kind of left with these challenges. Well, I want to tell you what happened in my business in early 2020 when people were facing all of that initial uncertainty. We reached out to our clients and we said to them, how can we help? What can we do to help you get through this crisis? And I got two kinds of emails back. One of them was, I think we need to pause. We don't know where our cash is going to come from. We don't know if we're going to get products. We just need to pause your services right now because we just don't have the cash in place to help us get through whatever is coming. And then I got the other kind of email back that I just loved. And it was, we've been doing Profit First now for a little bit. We're in good shape. We've got a cash buffer. We're sure we're going to be able to get through this. In fact, we're looking at some opportunities to really grow our business during that time. And that was just a real testament to me to what Profit First can do in your business. So today I want to talk about these challenges, but I want to put it in perspective because the real reason businesses fail is because of no cash flow. And so all of these challenges that you may be facing, put it into perspective of the problem really comes down to cash. Cash can help you navigate any situation. It can buy you time to figure things out. It can buy you some peace of mind while you make better decisions and figure out what you're going to do in the long term. And so to make it 10 years in business like InventoryLab has, they've done a good job with managing their cash flow. And what I want to teach you today is how you can do that too. So let's start thinking about what we can do to keep cash flowing in our machine. Right now, preserving cash is really important. And I've been on a number of panels and I've heard people give some advice that says things like, you shouldn't have debt in your business. You need to pay off your debt. And I think that's a bad strategy. I think right now, if you've got debt in your business, pay off it at the minimum rate that you can, because getting access to capital is going to be more expensive now than likely it was when you got that loan in the first place. So look at what debts you have, and if they're reasonable interest rates, don't be working to pay them off early. Just sit tight on that. Pay what you need to, but preserve the cash so you have more ability to weather the storm. I don't think it's a great time right now to invest in new equipment, especially if it's not absolutely necessary. hanging on to cash in case you hit a rough patch is the best thing you can do to weather any kind of uncertainty. And I suggest if you have some cash now, put it in something where it's low risk savings, something that you can get to fairly quickly. There's some really great online savings banks out there now. I've got a savings account with Discover Bank, and they're paying 3.6%. If I need access to that money, I can bring it back in. It just takes a day or two for it to transfer over into my checking account. So there's some really great saving rates out there now, and they're going up. And so having access to that cash is important, but actually making a little interest on it is important too. So this is kind of a set of solutions that you can use today. But I also want to help you understand how you can start building profits and building up this cash reserve. And that's with a solution called Profit First. Now, I wrote a book called Profit First for e-commerce sellers back in 2019. It was based on Mike Michalowicz's original book called Profit First, but it's tailored to the specific issues and challenges that e-commerce businesses have. Primarily, we talk a lot about inventory because that's a big challenge for my clients, is just being able to continually fund that inventory machine. So as you grow profits using this Profit First methodology, you'll also be growing cash, which, as we've said, that's the best way to stay in business. Growing cash is going to require you to change some behaviors. And the reason I love Profit First is because it is a behavioral-based solution. So let me tell you a little bit about what Profit First is and how it works with your behavior. And then I'll give you some how-to steps to put it into place. So Profit First was based on Parkinson's law, which is an economic law created by Cyril Northcote Parkinson. He was an officer in the British Navy, and in 1957, he came up with this law that basically said the more resources that you have available, the more you will expend. So basically, if you've got it, you use it. And this example here is one with toothpaste, which if you've got a full tube of toothpaste, you know that you probably put a lot of toothpaste on your toothbrush. If you have just a little bit of toothpaste, you tend to conserve. You know it's got to last until you get to the store. So that's just a really simple way to think about how we use the resources in our business. One of the primary resources that we have in our business is cash. And so if you are human, then what happens is if you see a lot of cash, then you feel like, oh, this is great. If you feel like you don't have much cash, then you make different decisions. And that goes back to this economic law called Parkinson's law. And it's one of the main drivers for Profit First. Now, another aspect of Profit First is that we are kind of trapped with this formula that's been around a long time called sales minus expenses equal profits. You know, if you've looked at your P&L or anybody's P&L, profit is what's left over down at the bottom. And if you couple that with Parkinson's law, then what tends to happen is you have your sales, you've got these resources available from selling your product, then you find a way to expend them because you use what you've got. So what tends to happen is there's not much left over at the bottom. So with Profit First, we just kind of flip the equation. We put profit up before expenses. So you continue to have your sales, and then you set aside funds for your profit. And then what's left is what you use to manage your expenses. You know, from a mathematics perspective, I'm sure we can all remember in high school how we used equations and could move the variables around. That's all we're doing here, but we're just moving profit first into this equation. But what it does is it changes our mindset and it puts things in the proper perspective for making good business decisions. One of the things that Profit First uses are bank accounts. we call it bank balance accounting. And I don't know if you're like me, but most of the audiences I speak to, I ask the question, how many of you log in and look at your bank every day? Most of the audience, the majority of people do look at their online banking every day. And so, but what does that really tell you? If you've got one checking account, everything is all mixed in there. How can you really know what the purpose of that money is? So one of the strategies for Profit First is to start setting aside money for profit, but putting it in a separate bank account so that you can see where you stand and how much money you really have left to run your business. When everything's all mixed together, it's kind of like vegetable soup. You don't really know how many carrots are in it, or how many potatoes, or green beans. It's just all mixed there together. But if you separate it out with separate bank accounts, you're able to see how much you have for a specific purpose. So we're putting that money to work and tracking it in our separate bank accounts, and we can see that online with our online dashboard. So here's what I recommend. It's a quick start method. This is what I like to do with our clients as we first get started. I call it a beach entry, and the reason is because I don't know each of your particular financial situations, so I want us to walk slowly in and get acclimated to the water. I don't want us to dive off a cliff and find ourselves flailing around trying to figure out what it is that we're going to do to get ourselves out of this situation. So if we do our beach entry, we're going to start with just 3 accounts. Now, if you've read Profit First, or I encourage you to read it or read my book, you'll see there are many more accounts that you could add. But this is just getting started. This is getting ourselves acclimated to the water. So most people already have an operating checking account, and that's going to be the primary account that you'll continue to use. But I want you to also have 2 other accounts. One is an account that you're going to use for inventory, and the other is an account for profit. Now, if you've got a business savings account, that's a perfect one to start using for profit. So many times what I find is that people have an operating checking account and a savings account for their business. So you may have those 2 in place. Just call one of them operating expenses, and the savings account you'll call profit. You'll just need one more bank account to get started, and that's for inventory. So here's how this will flow. Your deposits will come in from Amazon or wherever you may be selling. Those deposits will come into your operating checking account. Then you're going to allocate out a portion of the receipts that you got in, the deposits that you made. You're going to allocate a portion out to your inventory account. And I recommend starting with your replenishment cost. So if you know that you got a $10,000 in deposits for 2 weeks, and $3,000 of it was what it cost you for your inventory, you're just going to move that $3,000 into that inventory checking account. That money will build up and then be used to buy inventory in the future. Then with what's left, you're going to take that 1% of what's left, the $7,000, you're going to move that into profit. So you're starting to build your profit, and that profit will start growing and be set aside for a couple of purposes. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But then what's left is what you have to operate your business with. And you'll see pretty quick that many people are living off of the float, if you will, of the inventory, that they buy inventory, and that may be on a credit card, or it may be 60-day terms or something like that. And they're using the money during that time to pay operating expenses. So that's why we want to start slow and walk into this with just a few accounts and get our hands around it. So those are the 3 accounts, and that's the strategy. The dollars will come into your operating expense account. You'll move out your replenishment costs for the inventory of what you just sold, and you're going to then take, based on what's left, 1%, you put it in profit. So let's talk about why we separate these things out. First of all, inventory is as important in your business as cash. In fact, one of the reports I like to show to our clients is how their cash balances track and how their inventory balances track. And typically what you see is the cash balances are starting to grow, and then they buy inventory, and then they drop. The inventory balances started to grow, and as they dwindle. And so there's this relationship between inventory and cash. In fact, inventory is cash you can't spend, so to speak. It's something you can turn into cash. So by separating out inventory from your operating expenses, you start to learn what your cash flow is around inventory. Inventory is much more sporadic. Typically, it has a season to it, whereas most of your operating expenses are more typical month by month. Your insurance every month, your payroll every month, your facilities cost, those kinds of things tend to be the same month after month. And that is the cash flow you have in your operating expenses. So you want to get a feeling and an understanding of how things are flowing for your inventory and how they're flowing for your operating expenses. And because they have such a different nature in how the cash flows, it's really great to separate them out and have them in separate accounts. It's also important to have inventory separated out so that you can start to understand if you're replenishing that account as quickly as you need to be able to actually go out and buy more inventory. One of the biggest challenges I see with clients is they're always behind in buying inventory. They don't have the money to go out and buy inventory, so they rely on debt to be able to buy it. And right now, with interest being as high as it is, that's just a really big challenge for folks, is to try to be sure that they've got the cash in place to handle inventory. After I get through the discussion about Profit First, I'm going to give you some specific things that you can do right now. Profit First takes a little bit of time to get set up and going and really reap the benefits. You will see benefits immediately, but there's some things that you can do now to also set yourself up for success, particularly around inventory, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so inventory is a separate bank account. You're going to get the visibility of understanding if you're setting aside enough dollars, if you're wanting to grow, to have more inventory growth in the future, then in addition to that replenishment cost, you want to probably start ramping that up a little bit, especially as you get ready for Q4. So instead of just replenishment cost, you might want to add 10 or 20% to it. Again, this will be independent of this will be dependent on your situation for your business. So I can't prescribe something, but you really want to be careful about making these shifts too quickly, because what tends to happen is if people set up these accounts and move too quickly, then they need the money back in their operating account and they have to move it back. And then it just becomes this game of moving money back and forth. And that's not the objective. The objective is to start to get real visibility and setting aside funds for a specific purpose. Okay, we've talked some about operating expenses, but let's dig into that a little more. This is what you're going to need to watch this account very carefully, because if you've taken that inventory component out, sometimes that's as much as 30 to 40% of what you've been used to having in your checking account. So watch it carefully. You may also start to see that if you're watching just your operating expenses, you start to learn that every month it's about $4,000 or $3,000 or whatever your number is. You'll start to learn what that number is. And you'll also be able to say, you know, things are starting to change. What I used to get for $3,000 is now costing me $4,000. My operating expenses are creeping up. What am I going to be able to do to cut those? And we recommend people go through an exercise at least quarterly where you look at what your operating expenses are, and you go through with a red pencil and you figure out what you can cut or what you can reduce, because they just tend to stack up over time. When clients come to us initially, we find that we can usually cut $1,800 out of their operating expenses. So that's my challenge to you. See if you can find $1,800 that you can cut out of your operating expenses. And don't just do it one time. They creep up over time. we find software that we want to trial that requires a credit card that didn't quite work out, but yet we're still getting billed $59 for it or whatever. So you want to be able to look at that on a regular basis and do that exercise, like I said, at least quarterly, where you're looking at expenses and figuring out what you can cut. This puts the right pressure on business, because when you take out the profit and it's set aside, you're left with more visibility into your operating expenses, and you're forced to get more innovative. You're forced to be more frugal and efficient. So those are all three characteristics that describe a good business. So we want those pressures, and we also want to be getting rewarded for the efforts that we put into our business. Many times we as new owners don't take salaries. I recommend you get to that point as quick as you can, but to at least start out, you want to be taking your profits out. Profits serve a couple of purposes. One is they will be your reward. Now, as you're moving your money every couple of weeks, when you get your Amazon payout, you'll have another time period that you'll be paying attention to, and that is distributing your profit account. Every quarter, you're going to take out half of what you've put into your profit account. And the reason you take out half is because this is your reward. This is what you use to go out and celebrate. Maybe do something with your family, because we all know family is who gets the short end of a stick whenever entrepreneurs are working all day and all night, right? Especially Q4. But the other part is that it starts to build up. Your account will start to build up for your rainy day fund. And a rainy day fund, at a minimum, I would love for every business to have 3 to 6 months of their operating expenses set aside, so that if something were to happen, like a COVID or like any one of those challenges, a supply chain challenge, or Amazon losing your inventory or suspending your account or whatever, having that rainy day fund sets you up to go through whatever you need to do to make good decisions to get out of that predicament. Okay. So the third account, the savings account, will be your profit account, and it has two purposes. One, it's going to give you a reward every quarter, and the other half stays and starts to build your rainy day fund. And I know you may say, that's just not going to be very much with 1%. And it won't be. The idea is that over time, you're going to improve your operating cost, reducing them. And as you do that, you'll be able to build up more profit, and your profit percentages will go up to be as much as 15%. And so that's something you can work towards. But I want you to start slow so that you get the habits in place. You don't put a shock to your cash system. And as you get the system figured out, then you can put your attention to how you can cut operating expenses, how you can improve maybe cost with your suppliers, maybe adjust pricing, those kinds of things, how you can pull some other levers so that you can start to build up that profit account. All right, so just a quick reminder, we've talked about the money coming in to the operating expense account. You're going to allocate out the replenishment cost for inventory, or if you can do a little more than that because you're planning to grow, add 10% or whatever number makes sense for you. And then based on what's left, take 1% of what's left and put that in profit, and then start really working on your operating expenses and how you can cut them. And what you'll see is you can naturally start to build that profit percentage by reducing the expenses you have for operating expenses. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about frequency, because it's really important in the profit first world to understand that there's a rhythm to this. Some folks say, well, I get in there and I touch my money every day, and they're proud of that. And kudos for being on top of it. But what you lose by doing that is the ability to start to understand patterns and rhythms. So I recommend, maybe if you're just starting, pick one day a week, like Money Mondays, and that's when you go in and deal with money, or Thirsty Thursdays, and you go deal with them on Thursdays and then go out for a beer or something. But every week you go in and do the rhythm of these allocations like I've talked about. Now, if you're on an Amazon payout schedule that's every 2 weeks, they kind of dictate this rhythm for you. And Mike recommends in his book that we do it at least twice a month, or a preferable schedule will be twice a month. And that starts to allow you to see how the sales start to build up, and then how we allocate out, and then what takes our resources away and flows through either our inventory or our operating expense accounts, and we start to see that profit account build up. So that frequency is really important to understand and really get a sense of how our business is performing. You can go in there and look every day. I do, but it's giving you some information so that you can start to gauge, well, I'm this far into my payout schedule. Normally I'm at this percentage or this dollar value, and I'm not quite there. Wonder what I might do to boost sales or something like that. It gives you some real information that you'll start to be able to use your bank account as a dashboard. Now, we've already talked a little bit about the quarterly rhythm, but it's the second big rhythm within Profit First. And in the quarterly rhythm, what you're going to do is you're going to look at what's in your profit account, take half, like I mentioned, do something to celebrate, and then the other half is going to build up in that bank account over time. Now, one other aspect of that is this is the time to look at your operating expense accounts and figure out this cut, reduce type of exercise. So if you can put all that together in your special day quarterly where you look at expenses, then as you do that, you can start to get a sense of what the dollar value is that you're cutting each quarter. And then you can know then how much of a percentage you can ramp up to go to your profit. So first quarter that you implement this, I suggest start with the 1%. But at the second quarter, when you've looked at things that you've cut out over the quarter, I hope you can look at that and say, you know, I can move this up to 2% or 3% because I've actually cut those expenses out of my operating expense budget. So that's what happens quarterly. Now, Mike's not a big fan of credit cards, and in his book, he says use debit cards. I've just determined that that's not how e-commerce clients are going to work. They want those points. And so let's figure out how we can use credit cards effectively. And besides, you know, there really is some benefit to that float that we have. So credit cards, if you have them, use the same strategy by separating out your inventory credit cards from your operating expense credit cards. Keeping those separate will allow you to see, okay, I'm building up these dollars for inventory, and look at what I have on my credit card. I'm going to be able to cover those. So you're really not going to be in a debt situation because you've got the money already set aside in your inventory checking account to pay that bill when it comes due. The same kind of thing with operating expenses. And if you've got multiple credit cards, just go through, figure out how can you set aside one or two cards for operating expenses and then the other cards for inventory. Keeping them separate it'll help your bookkeeper, but it will also help your cash flow as well, as you can start to see how your debt compares to what you've built up. Now, I promised you some other strategies for today, how you can preserve cash. The number one thing is start with this kind of quick start method of Profit First. Get that going in your business. It will immediately start to set aside profits for you so you can be permanently profitable today. But over time, as it builds up, you'll really see the benefits of understanding the cash flow in your business. Other strategies that I recommend are focusing on proven products. Now is not the time to take big risk. If you've got something that's working, focus on that. Look at adjusting your pricing, look at cutting ad spend or adjusting ad spend, and then this cut, reduce, replace operating expenses. We'll go through each of these kind of quickly. So here's some things to look at. Proven products. Ensure you have the cash for reorders of your best products. If something is not moving quickly, or you do not get a good return, good margin on that product, don't put cash into it right now. That's something for another day. Dig into your data so you understand what your best products are, how you can improve them, figure out what to focus on, because focus right now is important. If you're considering new products, then a better strategy might be looking at new safe variations, things that have a little bit of a track record you could go count on a little more easily. Consider subscription models. There's a lot of folks doing that now, and those that are, I'm seeing a lot of benefits for them. Trim your products with low margins and trim products with slow sales that tie up your cash. Pricing. I saw a study not too long ago that 85% of retailers had experienced increased pricing from their suppliers, but only 71% have increased prices to their customers. So can you afford that? I mean, there's a big chunk of folks that aren't passing those costs along. Be sure you can afford that. Look at your pricing and understand what that impact is to COGS. And then ad spend. I see so many people just set their ads up and then forget it. And while that used to work, now there's so many variables that make that a challenge. So pay attention, look at it on a more regular basis. Are you overspending on ads? Can you go in and adjust your ad spend and see a difference in the sales that you're actually getting? And then be sure you're customizing for each product so that your products that don't have much margin, you probably don't want to do a whole big ad spend on. Products that you're low in stock and have trouble replenishing, you probably want to cut back your ad spend. So using your inventory information to adjust your ad spend is an important step for our clients to make. I've kind of talked about this already. Look at your operating expenses. What can you cut or reduce? What can you bring in-house? Are there subscriptions that you are subscribed to, services you've subscribed to? Are they really earning their keep? Are they really providing something that you need to run your business? Negotiate your terms with your suppliers. Pay attention to your shipment freight cost, and look at what your cost of debt is. And as I mentioned up front, don't be the person that goes and pays off a lot of your old debt to then have to borrow for new debt. So you're better off staying with old debt for a little while, and especially if that's at a good rate. Okay, I think I got through everything. That was a lot that I tried to merge there together. I am happy to answer questions now. I think we have a few minutes, Kim. I'm not sure, but I'm happy to answer questions now. And then we also have a booth in the expo, and I'm going to head over there right after this to chat with anybody that may have specific questions. Okay, and we do have a few minutes left, so I'm not seeing comments or questions at the moment. So let me talk a little bit about a more sophisticated profit first methodology. I don't have any slides for this, but I can give you a little bit of a feel for after you have got your initial setup kind of honed in and working, then you'll be in a position where you can go in and set up some of the other accounts that we recommend. The two that I hold off on until we get the first setup working are the owner pay accounts and the tax accounts. So if you're profitable in your business, you know that come April, there's going to be a tax bill. And one of the challenges is coming up with the money to pay that bill. So particularly at the end of Q4, try to get an estimate of what your tax bill may look like and set those funds aside. If you have a full profit first methodology working in your business, as you set aside money for inventory and for profit, you'll see that those funds are building there to be able to help you when you make your estimated taxes, or to be able to pay you on a regular basis. Like if you have take a paycheck out of your business, you'll be able to fund that, or take draws out of your business. That's where we all want to get to, is to have that side hustle turn into the thing that actually pays our bills. And so as soon as you get that very first quick start method up and working, then what you want to do is to start also moving in the direction of paying yourself and setting aside funds for taxes. One of the other things that I'll bring up is, profit first doesn't solve everything. As much as I love it, I think it is It is the kind of tool that works if you have a situation in your business where you're getting good gross margin and have enough cash to fund the other parts of your business. If you're leaking cash and you can cut out operating expenses and that solves the problem, that's great. But very often what we find is that clients haven't really got their profitability dialed in up at the gross margin level. So they may be setting aside funds for inventory, but it's at such a small amount that it really can't, or I should say, it takes up all of their funds. So there's such a small amount left to cover all the operating expenses. And for clients that we work with that may be in that situation, what we like to do is a 13-week cash flow plan. And so in the 13-week cash flow plan, we look at all of the products and when the bills are coming due, and we determine what is profitable, what is not making money from a cash perspective, what is slow to sell but ties up a bunch of cash because we have to spend that money in advance. And by looking at those things and putting that down on a spreadsheet where we can see the actual cost week by week and the dollars that are coming in week by week, we can start to better understand what we can do to match up the income with the expenses and where we really need to cut. I see Lorena has a question here. It says, where do you suggest people start when things seem intimidating? A lot of people are in that boat. A lot of people do find talking about and working with money and just all the complications of how money flows through an e-commerce channel to be challenging. I recommend people start with profit first. You know, I own an accounting firm and I think good bookkeeping is really important. But honestly, if you can start with this methodology of understanding where your money is going for specific purposes, setting aside those dollars for a specific purpose, then you will start to see the benefits of that very quickly and immediately, and then you can get your bookkeeping in order. Profit first can be done by folks without an accounting firm. So I would suggest taking a look at my book. And I think, Lorena, we've got some giveaways over in the expo that where we're giving away the first few chapters and discounts on one of our courses. So those are the kinds of things that I would suggest that you take a look at. Thank you for the question. I think we're about out of time. Anything else anybody has before we jump over to the expo? Okay, I'll take just this last minute and suggest if you're feeling challenged and intimidated, head over to our Bookskeep website. I do a ton of content. So there is just a lot there that you can read. We try to put it in everyday terms so that everybody can understand, what to pay attention to. And so go to bookskeep.com. And once you get in there, you'll find a do-it-yourself page where there's just tons of information from our blogs to other events where I've spoken, and we've got the recordings. If you're a little bit concerned about, okay, well, what's all this going to cost me for bank accounts? I suggest you check out Relayfi, RELAYFI.com. They are a bank that has just been designated the bank for profit first, and they have no fees. And so they're super great to work with. I've been using them for many years now, and they just this week became the official bank of Profit First, and they make it so easy to set up your accounts. They even have all of the transfer rules set up where you can go in and put in your percentages for how you want to allocate your Profit First dollars. So if you're at all concerned about the cost of putting in these accounts, relayfi.com. You can get more information about that, that bank, online bank. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you all being here today.